This is the fourth and final tutorial, level 3, on autumn leaves. And I'm going to talk about the minor major chord that I put in at the end of the second A section, and I'm also going to talk about the augmented chord and some phrases that you can use over that. And I've substituted that in bar, the 7th bar of the middle 8. So at the end of the second A section, instead of resolving to chord 1 in the minor, I've put a major 7th, and so that would sound like this, whereas normally the 7th is flattened. So the approach is normally, but now with this chord, the minor major 7th, it sounds a little bit more mysterious. Do people often do that? Yes and no. It's not a particular, it's not something standard. They go, oh, at the end of every second A you play the minor major 7th. But I just wanted to reveal some of the ideas that I would perhaps use. So in order to get a line to fit that minor major 7th, you need to incorporate that major 7th, which is, in this particular chord, is a G minor major 7th. If you like to think of scales, the harmonic minor with the flat 6 and the raised 7th would fit. That's the melodic minor with the raised 6. So the other one had the flat 6. The melodic minor has the raised 6 and the raised 7th. And those particular scales are all on jazz snippets, which is worth checking out if you need to revise those. So I'll play a little improvisation using the normal minor 7th, and then I'll resolve it with the major 7th. But they've all got minor thirds, so slightly different from a normal major 7th chord. So that's the normal one, and now you often hear people using the major 7th as a kind of delay of resolution. So a delay means, so that's use of that F sharp, really it's kind of sustaining the previous chord, which is the dominant, which has that note in it. So using that note. So when our lines keep that note, which in my case would be F sharp, that's kind of why it works. And you can just go back to the normal flat 7 after that. Anyway, it's a little bit of interest, a little bit of flavouring to spice up the music. In the 7th bar of the middle 8, I've used the augmented chord just literally for a bit more flavouring, just to make it sound a bit different, and that's not something I've invented. You hear it all the time in many tunes, but here we go. 2, 5, and then this is resolution to the major. If you put in a sharp 5, it just sounds quite nice. Your probably ear wants to go, but we're only there for 4 beats, so we're just going to stick on a major 7 sharp 5, which is an augmented chord. So with an augmented chord, a nice scale to go with it is the augmented scale, which again is in my jazz snippets if you want to go over that, but here it is for you to hear. And it's a scale made up of minor thirds and major. But it's kind of got a major third because the distance between the first note and the second note is a minor third, but then it goes up a semitone. So there's a lot of feeling of minor chords and major chords, and you can make minor triads and major triads a third apart, a major third apart. And I've put a little augmented pattern which utilises that. So I'm coming down, I'm actually playing a B flat augmented chords. So you can come down on a triad of F sharp, then D, then B flat. And you often hear people, I think saxophonists are often heard playing things like. Doesn't quite lie under my hand. I probably would readjust it. It's not a pattern I particularly use, but I know I've heard a lot of practicing saxophonists. I'm definitely hearing saxes now. I'm saying it, playing that. You could use the minor triads because they also are possible. So F sharp minor. But the major one has a little bit of more of a vibe to it. So I'm just going to improvise that whole line, which is 2 5 1 4, and I'm going to insert some ideas from that augmented scale. So you can see that it's quite, it gives it a little bit of sophistication when you hear that. That's a word I use quite a lot because it kind of shows a little bit more depth of knowledge when you start inserting different scales and knowing where's an appropriate place to use them. Obviously I'm a pianist, so I can create my whole sound world by adjusting my left hand to reflect the ideas that I have in my right hand. How could you do that as a saxophonist or a trumpeter? Well, you'd hope that if you started playing a phrase like that, maybe the rhythm section would be able to pick up on it. But, you know, sometimes you just hear a chord for 4 beats. You can sort of, it's not that dissimilar. I mean, if I didn't put the sharp 5 in the left hand, how would it sound? So you can kind of mix the two. Obviously you have to be careful with things like tritone substitutions, playing, you know, outside phrases that might not fit what the guitarist or pianist is playing. But the idea is that they are potential there. There's potential there to take it outside of the normal chords. Just going to play that little pattern of the one I did of major thirds coming down, major triads coming down in major thirds. I was just going to insert it just to show you that it's probably not very appropriate to play patterns when you're playing something like Autumn Leaves, but you might like to adapt it. So this is, I'm going to play an exact repetition of that, and you can see how it doesn't really sound quite right. I mean, I can't even play it because it just sounds so weird. And it sounds as though, oh, I'm trying to fit this in, trying to fit that in. So you're best off really getting some elements of the pattern, but maybe making it more your own and fitting it in with the vibe of the piece. So I'm going to now try and play the pattern a little bit and move on from there. So. And it still sounds like I'm trying to insert a lick, but you can see that if you practiced it maybe enough that it could be useful. But just to hammer out is probably the wrong place in this particular piece. Final thing I'm just going to talk about is the Lydian Dominant, which you can use in the 4th bar from the end. And so that sounds like this. And that chord is a substitute for chord 2. So we had a 2 5 1 to the minor. I've substituted chord 2 with a tritone substitution, and I've also changed it to a dominant 7th type chord. So before it was a minor 7 flat 5, but as I explained before, you can actually play a dominant chord there. An altered chord's quite good. So I've got that altered sound, and if I put a tritone bass note, which is an E flat in my key, and you get that sort of sound. It's more of a 13th sound. I'm putting in the sharp 11. So I've substituted a 2 5 1 with the tritone substitution, which case in my case is E flat, to chord 5 and 1. And your ear just hears it as a chromaticism. So an appropriate phrase to play over that would be something using the Lydian Dominant, and that I'll just demonstrate that. So that's hopefully given you lots of ideas and how to go about improvising on Autumn Leaves. And as I explained in level 1, we went from just very simple ideas, which simple is great, and every musician shouldn't ever shy away from the obvious and simple. But at some points it's nice to be able to reflect more complex harmony, more complex ideas in your improvisation. So hopefully if you've gone through the whole of level 3, that might help. And that's the end of level 3, tutorial 4 on Autumn Leaves.